in a HTEC conference, but I think it's worthwhile nonetheless. So, just tell a little bit about myself. My name's Brian Aiken. I've been teaching 16 years high school, 5 post-secondary, but that was teaching night classes and an adjunct. So it's not tacked on the end of it, it's stacked on top. 22 years industry experience before I started teaching school, and then 32 years ministerial experience. I'm a pastor of a Baptist church as well as teaching school, so I've been doing that 22 years as senior pastor, the rest of those years with everything, youth pastor, youth director, all the rest. So I'm well acquainted, understood kids before, well before I ever started jumping out of industry into what I was doing. 33 years married to the same woman. Man, I won't be like one of the guys on the job. He was a Vietnam vet. He looked one day at lunch, he said, you know, if I'd have choked my wife the first time I thought about it, I'd been getting out of jail about right now. But no. So happily married and thrilled with it. 4 grandkids, 7 grandkids. I like hunting, fishing, 4-wheel drive, raising Labrador retrievers. I teach at Pickens County Career Technology Center. That's in upstate South Carolina. I know that a lot of folks might be familiar with Clemson University. They won some national championship and bombed horribly a couple of years back, also trying to win one. They're in our county, so we're about 8 miles down the road from Clemson University, tucked away up in the corner of South Carolina at the foot of the Blue Ridge Mountains. So, next, machining, freedom, and prosperity, a biblical perspective. So again, this is one of the things that's kind of out of the norm, and some folks say, what in the world would the Bible have to say about machining or about any of the rest of those things? So, I was doing a little study, and here's what a lot of folks don't know. You likely, if you're an instructor, how many instructors we got in here? You know that you have the oldest teaching job recorded anywhere. Genesis chapter 4, verse 22 says of Zillah, she also bare Tubalcain. There's a guy that's got a YouTube channel, Tubalcain. And first time I saw him, where in the world did he come up with a name like that? This is where, Genesis 4:22. An instructor, and I hate reading slides, but I know way back in the back some of y'all can't read it. An instructor of every artificer in brass and iron. That means every artisan. And brass and iron, and then it gives them the genealogy about his sister. This is pre-flood. It's over 4,350 years ago. He worked in iron and brass, meaning he was working in alloys as far back as at least 4,300 years ago, and he was an instructor. Now, we've all heard what the oldest profession is. I don't know if that's true or not. I can tell you the oldest non-theological teaching job that I've ran across is actually a machining instructor. It goes way, 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 way back. So, little interest in history just to try to pique your interest on some things there. I just did a little search. Again, all these quotations, all this stuff's out of King James Bible. Iron shows up 91 verses. Brass shows up 118 verses. Silver 286, gold 365. Doesn't account for variations of the words. It is obvious that ferrous and non-ferrous metals were being used heavily during that time frame. And by the way, I'm willing to share this with anybody. You can tweak it, change it, use it. Maybe it'll help pique some interest amongst some of your students. So another thing. So as I was doing some studying, I preach 3 times a week and all the rest of those things. I hit across something, I ran across something. How many people are at least roughly familiar with the story of David and Goliath? You know, David, shepherd boy, takes a rock, a sling, goes out, kills a Philistine giant, slays him with a sling and a stone. This is where I'm going to have to sit down. That's another thing you normally don't do, but I got to run some stuff right here. So I'm going to show you some things. Unless I have a technical difficulty, I'm going to just show you a couple things. I'm not preaching. I promise I won't pass offering plate. So
you come up short.
I thought about it, but I decided not to.
You might lose your plate.
Anyway, I decided not to. So first place we're going to look is going to be found in 1 Samuel. And again, there's some stuff for some historical reference because I ran across something and I started wondering, is this the pattern for how all world kingdoms operate? So if you look at 1 Samuel 17, I promise you I'm not going to go through an entire chapter. I'm just going to point out a couple of things. I'm going to skip on down. David showed up, volunteered. Everybody else was scared to death, wouldn't go out and fight. And then it didn't go to where I wanted it to do. 1 Samuel 17. Little technical. David went and he offered himself up, willing to fight. And then we see that Saul, he argued and said, you can't go out and fight against the Philistine. He's a man of war. You're a youth. You're too young. And then you start talking about killing a lion and a bear. Most folks are familiar with some of these things, even if you're not a regular church attendee. But look here, it says, Saul armed David with his armor. So Saul, the king, gave David his armor. Said, all right, if you're going to go out and fight, shepherd boy, I'm going to give you the armor. And then he essayed to go. He refused to go, for he had not proved it. And David said to Saul, I cannot go with these, for I have not proved them. And David put them off. So why in the world would David refuse armor? Number one, you do a little study, you find out that Saul was taller than anybody else by head and shoulders bigger. David, just a youth, just a young man, so it wouldn't fit. Why didn't they just go out in the army and say, hey man, private, you're about this size. Give him your armor, give him your sword, give him all the rest. Why in the world did he go out? Because as we look down, he said he took his staff in his hand, went out with a shepherd's stick, chosen 5 smooth stones out of the brook, put them in a shepherd's bag, which he had, even in the script, and his sling was in his hand. So he goes out to fight with 5 rocks and a sling, no armor. Why? Good question. Why? Well, he had never done it. But there's more to it. And that's why I want to point out that as I began doing some studying on this, I started asking why. I backed up a few chapters and ran across something that just really stuck out to me. And then, so we're going to go back to our slide presentation. Again, this is about 1040 BC, roughly. And let me change this display setting. 4 chapters prior. We're going to look at that. And all the people fled. They ran, they hid, they ran from the Philistines. Why did they not stand and fight? Why did they not sit and do that? And then we're going to look later in that chapter, we're going to figure out the why. So, back to our little app, we're going to look back there in scriptures, and we're going to be in chapter 13. Again, I'm not going to be in the Bible long. We're going to look at world history, a little brief breakdown. We're going to look at the British Empire. We're going to look at, we're going to look at Nebuchadnezzar and how they dominated. Then we're going to look at the British Empire, and then we're going to look at how in the world did America wind up getting free. We're going to look at why in the world did the South lose the Civil War. And then we're going to look into World War II and then look forward in the future. So I'm just giving you a little brief breakdown of what we're looking at, because some of y'all are probably looking for the door about right now. So in, don't get dizzy. We're going to look back in 13, chapter 13. We're going to figure out why. Why in the world did they have to fight with rocks? Why were they not able to fight back? So we're back here on it now. Did it go? No, it didn't go. Let me hit the little button right up here. Thank you for the technical help. We all need it. So they picked a fight with in the first part of the chapter, they picked a fight with the Philistines, went out and fought, a little handful of them. Philistines, they really made them mad. The Philistines gathered themselves together to fight with Israel. 30,000 chariots, 6,000 horsemen, and people as the sand which is on the seashore multitude. And they came up, pitched, these 2 hard to pronounce places were the towns where they stopped and got ready to fight. Verse 6 says, the men of Israel saw they were in the strait. They're in a bad spot. It was between a rock and a hard place. For the people were distressed, and the people did hide themselves in caves and in thickets and in rocks and high places and pits. Now, were they really that scared? Did they really have a reason to be that scared? It's a big host and an army that came up against them, but generally, geographically, the Philistines didn't control that much territory. So looking on down in here, probably only a machine instructor that's a pastor would ever catch some of this, but it just jumped out as I looked at it. later on in here, we see this. Now, and I'm reading this for all y'all in the back. It says, now there was no smith. And that wasn't a family name Smith. That was a skilled worker that could work in metals. There was no smith found throughout all the land of Israel, for the Philistines said, lest the Hebrews make them swords or spears. But all the Israelites went down to the Philistines to sharpen every man his share, and his coulter, and his axe, and his mattock. What was that? All farm implements. And they had to go to the Philistines to get all that done. The Philistines were kind that said, yeah, they had a file for some of them. That's the full extent of their machine tool industry, was a file. And it says, so it came to pass in the day of battle that there was neither sword nor spear found in the hand of any of the people that were with Saul. He was king of Israel, and Jonathan, but with Saul and Jonathan his son there was found. That's why there was a little handful that had swords, spears, and shields, and armor, and all the rest of the army that Israel could put out, they didn't have nothing to fight with. And the Philistines dominated because they controlled the technology. They dominated the battlefield because they controlled the ability to produce armaments and the ability to defend themselves. So I'm like, wow, that's good. I wonder if I had, and I can show you gobs more places, but we're not going to spend hours and hours. I'm trying to keep up with my time on some of this. So going back to the presentation, there's going to be one more stop biblically that we're going to take a look at. Going to jump forward a little bit in the historical time frame, closer to where we are, but just a little. The Babylonian destruction of Jerusalem of 586 BC. Well documented historical fact taking place. The Babylonian kingdom came down. This was a multi-year process. The Israelites decided they was going to rebel against it, wasn't going to be a vassal state underneath them. And then the destruction of Babylon, when Babylon came in, utterly decimated, you read about it in multiple passages of scripture, utterly decimated Israel and Jerusalem and took them over. So I read across and I hit this one thing. What was it they did when they got there, other than destroying the city, carrying away the loot, all the rest of it? Their apparent policy was for everybody around, they would defeat the neighboring nations, they would gather their skilled workers, they would strengthen their own nation with them, and they would restrain those nations from having the ability to build finished goods and properly equip a military. So here's where you would find that in this particular verse. And as you track through history, it all fits like a hand in a glove. Our next stop is going to be just a couple of verses in 2 Kings. So y'all can go back and brag to your spouse you went to church today. After last night, you probably need it. 24. And let's go. I'll hit my button this time. I just want to look. This all comes down about Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. Big, huge world empire, dominated. They were centered in and around where modern day Iraq is, came down into where Israel was, decimated the whole region around them. And then I want you to look now at this little tidbit. Verse 10. At that time, the servants of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came up against Jerusalem. The city was besieged. Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, came to the city and searched to besiege it. This is the king of Judah that went out, stood up against them. Look at what he did. He carried away all the treasures of the house of the Lord, treasures of the king's house, cut in pieces all the vessels of gold which Solomon, king of Israel, had made in the temple. So it just sounds like they looted them, right? But it's more than that. He carried away all Jerusalem and all the princes and all the mighty men of valor. So he decimated the military as well as the government, even 10,000 captives, and all the craftsmen and smiths. What did they haul away? It wasn't just the pretty women. It wasn't just the money. It wasn't just the politician. It wasn't just the military. They hauled away the craftsmen and the smiths. None remained save the poorest sort of the people of the land. So the way they wound up dominating Israel and the region all around is they hauled all the technology back to their country, all the skilled craftspeople to their country, and they left nothing but a service economy and agricultural economy behind. So they had no ability to fight back and to make war. So, back to my slide now. So, does history always repeat?
Sometimes it rhymes.
It at least rhymes really, really, really good. So, oh, come on now. Now we got it. Next slide. I'm trying to move quick. Now, a historical perspective. The British Empire. All the areas shaded in red. Now, naturally, there wouldn't have been nice, neat, straight lines where Alaska sits, the western part of the U.S. sits. It wouldn't have followed exactly some of these country lines, but I found this up. The British Empire, this little spot right there, come on now, where you at? My mouse ain't working. Right here. How did that little bitty island nation dominate all this? How is it possible? Numerically, they couldn't do it. So how did the British Empire manage to push all its power all the way to India, Australia, all the rest of the areas, and keep that under control? So, a couple things. And at one time, 1/3 of the world's population was under the British Empire. So they did diplomacy, they controlled the leaders. They had a strong navy and advanced army, so they had the best of the best, and they could project force when they needed to. But how did they really control them? Still, you had limitations on that. They did it with trade deals. I found one of these, example, the 1651 Navigation Act, and you can find gobs more of this. It required all imports to colonies and exports from colonies be to and from England, and on English ships. So therefore, they controlled the international trade from all of their colonies, and that all the exports, if they were going to export it, they had to send it at least back to England, or they had to send it on English ships to wherever it was going, and the English had control over it. So colonies were for raw materials, and finished goods were manufactured primarily in England. You start following on the Industrial Revolution, you're going to find England was at the forefront of it all, and America wound up tagging along behind on some of those things. They kept the colonies dependent for nearly everything on finished goods, nearly, and they were unable to effectively fight back. That's how the British did it. So, how in the world did America get free? We got anybody here from Canada? Not knocking the Canadians, man. But welcome. I'm glad you're sitting in on this. Because it's all part of it. It's all part of it.
Y'all talk funny down here.
Well, I found this out. It depends on where you're standing as to who talks funny. So.
He definitely does.
Well, it's a little closer to my house in Canada, I think. But anyway, everybody's got an accent. It just depends on where you're standing at any given time. So, how did America get free? America in the colonies prior to the Revolutionary War was mostly agricultural by a long stretch. Supplied mostly raw materials, with the exception of they had some shipping, a fair amount, because it was so hard to ship all those up. There's a lot of shipping manufacturing that was happening up on the coast in the Northeast. Mostly raw materials and agricultural goods went to England. Most durable goods were imported. And the arms industry was primarily local gunsmiths, specializing in hunting guns, shotguns, flintlocks, long rifles, not military weaponry. Now, what I have in here, I'm going to show briefly just a little clip, if this works.
Do you want to borrow a mouse with a cord?
Do what now?
Do you need a mouse with a cord on it?
I think we
Grapple at the fork.
So let me look.
Here you will heat and hammer a bar of solid wrought iron into a flat scalp, heavy at one end, tapering slightly in both width and thickness to the other.
How's this for barrel manufacturing? It's a great video to watch. I'm not going to show it all. I'm just going to skip forward. So they curl it around, turn it into a gun barrel.
Once the barrel is heated,
See, this lays out. There's your CNC. This in South Carolina be RNC, redneck control.
then a long pin is attached to the chuck. The pin is oiled with linseed oil.
Maybe Tubalcain needs to watch that.
In operation, the bit is turned by a heavy crank. The weight to provide momentum and smooth the turning. And the barrel
There's
is
your
put
lathe.
into the bit.
Not even 1 horsepower.
The first boring bit does not cut from end to end. It just hits the high spots in the barrel here and there, so I push this through by hand.
I gotta skip forward. I mean, it's cool to watch all this stuff. It's all linked in this PowerPoint.
After each
Checking perpendicularity.
size to fit inside the barrel. He will eventually thread both the barrel and the breech plug to make a firm attachment that allows the plug to be removed when necessary.
Let's skip forward.
Except for files and hacksaw blades. Even things like screw plates or dies are easier to make than the lock of a gun.
This goes into how they cast the lock plates, all the sort of stuff they do on there. Great video.
This here engages with knots.
I'm just going to kind of pop through and let you watch. Again, this is on there. I'll give this to anybody that wants it.
Once we have remilled
Think you
the
could use it?
times during the making of the gun, each screw
So-
must go back into the hole they
No,
came
I
out
got
of.
to try to stay on task. I don't want to run late. If anything, I'll get y'all lunch a little
That's where
early.
Bridget Tapping came from.
There you go, buddy. There you go. So that's what all went into making one. And they rifled this. It showed how they rifled that barrel and how they did all of it. And this was at Colonial Williamsburg, where they reenact, dress properly, do all the stuff, exactly the same technology, just like what they did back in the day. So if, I guess, what would we say, old world skills and new world thrills or something? That's some old world for you. So,
The thrill being when you fired it for the first time.
oh, they show they proof fire it with triple the load. They clamp it down onto a big block of wood and pour a powder charged string and hide and light it to see if it blows up. It's all on video. So they proof test the barrels. So, how did America wind up getting free? If we were primarily agriculture and all the rest. Here's how. Number one, the grace of God. Number two, England had long supply lines. It was also busy fighting elsewhere. They was trying to protect the whole empire. They couldn't just be dealing just with us. France entered and broke the naval blockade. Supplied lots, 2 thumbs up to the French. Supplied large numbers of military weapons. The Continental Army fought whatever they could get. Primarily the British Brown Bess, which they had captured, got their hands on, and the rest of it. And the French Charleville, which was 69 caliber smoothbore musket, both of which were imports. Tried to fight a war off of imports. The militia often fought with their own weapons. That's kind of what we was looking at there. Usually rifles. Generally, they were very, very good quality, very capable of making long shots, but that's not necessarily conducive to standing in a straight line and hammering away against the British at 50 yards. You're going to get clobbered in a fight like that. So here's another link that's on here. It'll be very helpful to you, be able to show some of that. Or some schools might even be able to show this. Come on. Pull up, pull up, pull up, pull up.
Short-barreled muskets are a lot easier to reload.
Yeah. Technical difficulties. There we go. Oddly enough, some of the craftsmanship was beautiful, but it was so much hand fitting, not a lot of interchangeability from one to another. So, examples of some of the ones that was common stuff that was fought with, used in the American Revolutionary War. The French Charleville 69 caliber infantry musket, you had Brown Bess. There was a little bit of manufacturing that was taking place. And I'm going to drop down Pennsylvania style long rifles were often being used then. And then this particular musket, Virginia State Gun Factory in Fredericksburg, Virginia. This is an example of one of the ones that was made there. So it's not that there wasn't much, there wasn't any, it's just there wasn't much. So that was a war by the grace of God. We got out by the skin of our teeth and fought a war using imports to make it happen. So fast forward a few years. You can tell from my accent. That's why I phrased it this way. The American Civil War. How did the South lose? How? I would make a joke and say I've been around a lot of folks from up north and I would still wonder why we lost. But no. Anyhow, again, that's a joke. I don't want to get stabbed over it. But analyze how. How did these things happen? The North had a larger population, 19.6 million. South, a smaller population, 8.2 million. Not all those would have been willing to wear gray and fight. The North retained most of its pre-existing military hardware and Navy. South retained only what they could capture. Transportation in the North. Railroads, 22,000 miles of railroad. Transportation in the South railroad, 9,500 miles, most of which ran north or ran to the coast for export. Ships. A lot of questions about how much the South put forward. However, I did find this pretty well accurate. When the war broke out in 1861, the North could put up 90 ships out to battle. By 1865, 626 ships, 65 of which were ironclads. Now let's understand this. I've seen some stuff that was made during the Civil War, prior to the Civil War. Manufacturing quality, what was cranked out in the South, wasn't necessarily bad. First ship sunk by submarine was done in Charleston Harbor with a Hunley. Man, you're going to want to kill Yankees bad to hop in that. It done killed 2 crews. And you're going to crank out in the harbor and stab a torpedo and back up to blow a ship up. You're going to want to kill somebody bad. So a lot of innovation, but not a lot of manufacturing. Primarily agricultural economy, heavily industrialized in the North. Because the breakup with England, now America was going through its industrial revolution. They made their own military arms and equipment. The South, dependent on imports for military arms and equipment. Whatever came through the blockade, that's what they got. Large percentage of Southern troops wound up fighting with British 1853 Enfields that ran through the blockade, came out of England. So again, what's his theme again? Imports, lack of manufacturing. Follow all that stuff all the way down the line. This, I did not know it was going to be this small. I'm going to take my word for it. I'll try to read correctly. Just a little summary. In 1860, the South was still predominantly agricultural, highly dependent upon the sale of staples to a world market. By 1815, cotton was the most valuable export in the United States. By the way, during that time frame, South Carolina was the wealthiest state in the nation. By 1840, it was worth more than all other exports combined. But while the southern states produced 2/3 of the world's supply of cotton, 2/3 of what was made in the world, the South had little manufacturing capability. About 29% of the railroad tracks in the nation, only 13% of the nation's banks. The South did experiment with using slave labor manufacturing. For the most part, it was simply agricultural. The North, by contrast, was well on its way to a commercial manufacturing economy, which would have a direct impact on its war-making ability. By 1860, 90% of the nation's manufacturing output came from northern states. The North produced 17 times more cotton and woolen textiles than the South. The South grew 2/3 of the world's supply, but it all got shipped up north and turned into cloth. That's why you had soldiers marching around that was having to use captured Yankee clothes, took off a dead Yankee with a hole in it, and wear it while they was fighting. We could grow it, we just couldn't turn it into cloth. Not on a big scale. 30 times more leather goods produced in the north. 20 times more pig iron. 32 times more firearms. Break that down. The north produced 3,200 firearms every 100 produced in the south. Only about 40% of the northern population was still engaged in agriculture by 1860, as compared to 84% in the south. That's how it was lost. So, let's skip forward. Let's see if the same theme holds true. World War II, how the Allies won. 1838 through 1945 industrial production. I know I may have left some countries out on all this. Primarily you had Allies, you had the Axis powers, and those nations combined. Well, now hang on. Captain America, the Star Spangled Man. How many of you ever watched that movie?
Yep.
Okay. So I'm going to show you a little excerpt of it. Hopefully it'll play. Browse YouTube. Excuse the commercial. Well, what did we learn from Captain America? Well, one thing you say is that it took more than the guys that was out shooting and getting shot at and spilled their blood for it to make it happen. Let's go back to our presentation. This is where it gets really small. I apologize. Y'all have to trust what I'm reading. Now, according to Wikipedia, yeah, I know. So do not try to write a federal grant based on the information I give you right here. However, we're trying to roll out the principle to our students. Why is manufacturing important? Why does it even matter? Why is it okay? Is it not okay that part of our supply lines read right back to China and everywhere else. Well, let's look what happened with World War II. Again, this is going to be really bad, so I'm just going to try to throw some stuff out to you. Just a few major weapons groups. The Allies, during the course of the war, if these numbers are correct, 4,358,000 tanks of self-propelled artillery and military vehicles. The Axis powers put on the field 670,000. Aircraft, 637,248 for the Allies. The Axis powers, 300,000. Missiles, there was where edge was. It was not the Nazis didn't have good technology. They were the first one to put fighter jets in the air. That was Nazis. First ones to use rocketry effectively, V-2 rockets from continental Europe, wind up hitting England and all the rest of those things. It's not that it was a lack of technology, raw ability. It was the ability to manufacture in bulk. So, ships, the Allies, 54,931 ships put in to service. The Axis, that's a bogus number right there, no doubt. But we'll find some other places where it shows something slightly different because it breaks down by cargo ships, merchant shipping, coal, crude oil, steel, aluminum. These are in tons produced. This is broke down across the course of the years, and it's broke down by country, what they contributed to all those things. Total aircraft, the U.S. put, and its territories, put 295,959 of those airplanes in the air, compared to what other countries did. Germany and its territories, about 133,000 they put in the air. The Japanese, about 64,000. See a big consistent following through there. Rosie the Riveter is what helped win the war. As we look on down at a couple of other things, I looked at, hopefully I didn't skip over it, gross domestic product. The UK, well, let's just start with the whole British Empire, because that takes a lot. I'm assuming Canada gets thrown in underneath that, the way this is broke out. 684,000. My understanding, this is in billions of dollars computed against all levelized across the countries in 2014 dollars. So, it ain't worth that much no more. But British Empire started the war 684. By 1945, ended the war at 731. The French, theirs dropped off from 235 down to 150. Soviet Union, 359, dropped off to 343 in the middle of it. United States, total, we look at that, 824. So it's already a manufacturing powerhouse, more than anyone, including the British Empire. By the end of the war, 1,498. Nearly doubled military production in the course of 5 years. That's in gross domestic product. You can break that down. The Germans, theirs dropped off 351 down to about 310. Italy dropped from about 141 to 92. Japan, 169 down to about 144. It's pretty hard to keep up production when you got, the Star-Spangled Man with a plan dropping stuff on your head and the Allies doing that stuff. It's pretty hard to keep your military production up. Again, go back, analyze, take a look at over some of this stuff. That's how the U.S. and its allies, because there's a lot of other blood, Canadian, British, French, others wound up dying trying to get out from underneath the Nazi regime. But let's close it out with this one thought. And so what about now? What ifs? I'm just throwing you what ifs out there, okay? What ifs? Currently right now, the latest I could get, gross domestic product. The United States is sitting at $20.89 trillion. China 14.72 trillion, Japan 5.6, Germany 3.8, the UK 2.6, India 2.6, France 2.6, Italy 1.9, Canada 1.6, South Korea 1.6, Russia 1.4, Brazil 1.4, Australia 1.3, Spain 1.2, Indonesia. See it descending now. Now it don't sound that bad until I got showing this to Treon, and he gave me a slide to add some more detail to it. So gross domestic product, China is there, right? I mean, nipping on our heels. The next slide is what makes me want to throw up. Manufacturing output 2018. Again, we're asking what if? What if we were in another protracted war? What if we were up against something bad and the unthinkable that we had to do? China, this is manufacturing output. Even though we have a significantly higher gross domestic product, China's setting at $4 trillion in 2018, the U.S. at 2.3. Manufacturing. All of North America, Canada is at 1.69 billion. Mexico would be in there somewhere. So North America accounts for 18% of the world's manufacturing. Europe 22%, with Germany coming in at 8.06 billion, and then scattered across the different ones through Europe. Asia, 52% of the world's production's coming out of Asia right now in manufacturing goods, and China's sitting at $4 trillion. So, does it matter when you start thinking of the process? World history always rhymes. Doesn't always exactly follow, but whoever and however our political leaders and others have thought that, oh, it's better if we import it out of China or import it out of somewhere else than if we make it here, are setting us up for calamity based on the historical perspective. So that basically, if nothing else lights a fire underneath me as an instructor, that helps light a fire underneath me. So that kind of closes out the presentation. I wish I could leave you as exciting as Star Spangled Man with a plan.
You're not going to dance for us?
No. I might would hold up one of them dancing girls or something, but no, I ain't gonna do that. And you don't want to see me in tights, even if I got a mask
I
on.
wasn't even going to ask.
So anyway, thank y'all for attending. If y'all got questions, if you want copies of this, I'll share anything you got. Maybe it'll be helpful to you. Nothing else, you can share it with some others in faculty and some of the other ones of what the importance is that we keep manufacturing on the North American continent.
That slide right there, is that howmuch.net? Is that what it says on the bottom?
Howmuch.net.
Okay.
There you go. Howmuch.net, straight from Treon. If it's fake news, it came right from our president. All right. So thank y'all for coming.
Thank you.
All righty.